So now what we're going to do is we are going to discuss the different problem types that addition and subtraction story problems can be categorized. And there are a total of 12 different categories, but they have some things in common. And so you just had the opportunity to categorize them in the Desmos activity. And so now we're going to talk a little bit more about them, and you may want to go back and maybe reread them and think about if you would like to change your categories or not. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is we're first going to start by thinking about asking ourselves two questions when we start analyzing story problems. And so the first thing that I always ask myself is there an action that is happening in the story problem? And the action is going to refer to something that's happening in the story, not the action or the operation I'm going to use to solve the problem. And so if there is an action, then I think, what is the action? Is there a joining action? And this means that there is some number that is joining the initial quantity. Or is there a separating action? And that means that there's some that are being removed from the quantity, from the initial quantity. And what these problems are helpful in that they're temporal. So there's sort of this movement over time, and they unfold like a movie or a fictional story. So there's something that happens at the beginning, there's something that happens in the middle, and then there's something that happens at the end. And so again, you can think of it as you have to watch the entire movie to think about how this story will unfold. And it's the same thing with these particular story problem types. We start with something that happens at the beginning, at the start, and then there's some sort of a change that happens, and then we end up with some sort of a result. And we're either, with the change, it's either joining to the initial or it's separating from the initial. And so what you might want to do is you might want to go back to your card sort and think about, do you have any story problems that have action? And I'll give you a hint, there's 6 of them. And so what I think about also is, so the first question is there an action? And if there is an action, then my second question is, where is the unknown in the story problem? And the unknown is sort of that missing quantity, the answer that we want to solve. And so is the unknown at the beginning of the story problem? And if it is, then we say that it has the start. Our start is unknown. We don't know what the initial quantity was that we started with. Is the middle unknown? And so we solved some of these problems last week with those that Miss Keith did, right? So that middle number, we call it the change. The change is unknown. Or is it at the end? After we've started with something, we've done some sort of change to it, and then the result. So is the result unknown? And I will say that the result unknown story problems, these tend to be the easiest story problems for kids to solve, because it's the most common. We always ask them, so you have 5 blueberries and you get 2 more. How many do you have at the end? So kids have a lot of knowledge and experience with these particular story problems, so they're going to be a lot easier for kids. The change, these are going to be a little bit in the middle, and then our start unknown problems are going to be the most difficult. And the reason being is that we don't have a starting point. So kids aren't quite sure what to do at first. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. So they may start something and try it, see what happens, and see if they get the result that's stated in the problem. And if they don't, they'll pretend to just start all over again. So again, these story problems tend to be some of the most difficult ones for kids to solve. And I will add that research has shown that action and the location affects the difficulty level of the problem. And I'm going to post this problem chart on Canvas that's going to kind of help you think about some of these ideas. And I'll share it right now with us. And let me see if I can stop sharing, and I'm going to share another document with you. And so this is our problem chart, our story problem chart, and these are all 12 of them organized. But I'm just going to focus on the top 2 rows of the problem chart right now. And so when we name story problems, we will, for the top part of the story problem chart, is we name it by the action. So is it a join or is it a separate problem? And then we name it based on where the unknown is. So for example, Connie had 5 marbles, Juan gave her 8 more. How many marbles does Connie have altogether? We have the starting amount. She started off with 5 of them. We can even picture that in our head. Juan gave her 8 more, so we have this giving of she's getting more. The initial quantity is growing, so the change is 8, but we don't know how much she has at the very end with the result. So this is a join result unknown story problem. And so what I want to say is that when it comes to this particular problem chart, the problems are easier at the top and get more difficult as you go down the chart. And as you start on the left-hand side, those are easier than the ones on the right-hand side of the chart. So if you think about this as a whole, your join result unknown story problems are going to be the easiest story problems to solve. And then when we go across, your start unknown problems are going to be a little bit more challenging. And we'll get to the bottom rest of the chart in just a moment. But again, so if we go back to our PowerPoint again. So the 2 questions that we ask, is there an action? And if there is an action, we ask, is it joining or separating? And then our second question we ask is, where is the unknown? So is the unknown at the beginning, the start? Is it at the middle, in the middle, the change? Or is it at the end, the result? So we'll stop here for just a moment, and then I'm going to come back and we'll talk about those problems that, so my first question was, is there action? But what if there's not an action? So we'll talk about that in just a little bit.